Welcome to NarrativeNook where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Seeing the earnest look on Clark's face, she moved towards the window and peeked out. There was no sign of anyone pursuing Carol, only her loyal crew waiting at the base of the plane stairs, ready to welcome her. Ever since she'd found her roots, she rarely came back, and the guys were ecstatic to see her. They all looked expectantly towards the plane, like kids waiting for candies from their teacher. Arabella curled her lips in amusement, quite the welcome party. Seeing his sister moving to open the plane's door, Clark quickly intervened, knowing the potential danger. You still want to proceed? I'm talking about the welcoming committee. Arabella hit the switch, and the plane door slowly opened. Before Clark's concerned caution could leave his lips, a group of about 50 people standing by the stairs shouted in perfect unison, "Boss, welcome home." Their boss hadn't been home in quite a while. Seeing her standing at the top of the plane stairs, everyone couldn't help but get excited. Their boss had become even cooler. But who was the guy behind her? Who was he? Even Clark was taken aback by the unified greeting. He turned to his sister in disbelief. This is Mafia Flame. Arabella was the first to descend the plane stairs. Clark, we are home. Home? Mafia Flame was her home? She was the boss of Mafia Flame? It took Clark a full 3 seconds to process this. He followed his sister's steps. As far as I know, Mafia Flame was founded 3 years ago. How old were you then? Why did you come to the Triangular Zone and become the boss here? His mind was filled with questions. It's a long story. Arabella briefly explained that 3 years ago, her grandmother Grace had fallen seriously ill and urgently needed a certain herbal cure. This herb only grew on the Medicine Mountain in the Triangular Zone. At that time, several factions were fighting over the mountain. Arabella had shown upright in the middle of this intense conflict. Because Grace's illness required long-term treatment with the herb, and the herb could only grow in the soil of the Medicine Mountain, Arabella, by a stroke of luck, not only managed to establish Mafia Flame and seize the hill, but also expand her power. Although she had come close to dying in the Triangular Zone several times. But later on, Granny Grace no longer needed the herb. Whenever she thought of Granny Grace, Arabella's heart would ache as if being torn apart. The day Granny Grace closed her eyes forever on the operating table, Arabella, as Dr. Bell, felt helplessly futile. This regret was something no one could understand. Boss. Seeing their boss descend the plane stairs, everyone cheerfully called out and then turned their eyes toward Clark, unsure how to greet him. This is my brother, Clark. Arabella introduced him and then added, blood-related. Everyone was stunned. The boss always managed to surprise them. Just like the last time, she had inexplicably formed an alliance with the boss of Mafia C, then cleaned out Mafia Wolf, shocking the entire Triangular Zone. Mafia Flame and Mafia C had never had any contact before. Many couldn't understand why they suddenly allied. What was the reason? Even those within their own circles were unclear about the boss's moves. Later, both factions issued stern warnings, stating that if anyone dared to harm one of them, the other would definitely not let them off. So, they had been living peacefully in the area for some time, but recently, new factions had risen, along with old gangs, all wanting to meet with their leader. Snapping back to reality, everyone, in unison greeted, "Cheers to Clark." Clark merely nodded, greeting them back, yet inside, he was utterly stunned. How much hardship had the girl gone through to be sitting in that chair as the boss everyone referred to? No wonder she always came off as aloof, forever wearing that indifferent expression, seemingly uninterested in anything. Having grown up in the Murphy household with foster parents who didn't care for her and even used her as a scapegoat, she never knew the warmth of a family. Other than Granny Grace, it seemed no one truly cared for her or nurtured her. She had to fight for everything herself, which was why she became so independent and self-reliant. Her cold demeanor, her coolness, her exceptionalness, all were bought with her blood and tears. Like Serena, who had never been knocked down by life, always pampered by the family, had everything she wanted, did everything she wanted, unaware of how many sweet deals she enjoyed, how much fortune she had. But his own younger sister, due to a mix-up, had to scratch and claw her way here, truly experiencing endless darkness and hardship to achieve what she had now. Thinking of this, he felt admiration, and his eyes unknowingly welled up with warmth. He silently vowed to himself that he would doubly make up for everything his sister hadn't experienced, hadn't received. He would give her double. "Boss, some new gangs have been asking for you lately," one of his underlings reported, trailing behind Arabella, "and people from Hellbase, they want you to visit their turf alone within 3 days to discuss something. If not, they threaten to make trouble for us." Arabella responded coldly, "What gives them the nerve to ask for this?" Just the mention of Hellbase was enough to ignite her rage. Hellbase was a terrifying overseas organization that had later established a foothold here, often clashing with the Mafia flame. It was one thing for small disputes, but a year ago, they had tried to kill Myrna Geller. Arabella had unintentionally witnessed it and jumped in to help, considering their common enemy. Myrna had been seriously injured and fled while Arabella intervened. Not only was she on a covert mission and worried about blowing her cover, but she was also afraid of falling into enemy hands again, and she needed to detoxify the lethal poison in her body. Though they formed a bond as sisters-in-law, it only made Hellbase despise them more. Lately, those foreigners seem to have a stronger backing, and their arrogance is off the charts. If you didn't know any better, you'd think they were something special. The underling sneered. "Didn't you give them a lesson?" Arabella retorted. "We did. When they swaggered into our territory with threats, we blew up their car. But they didn't retaliate, not sure what they're plotting. Don't bother with them." Arabella said flatly, "If they're in a hurry to meet their maker, we'll be happy to oblige." Saying this, she had descended from the drug hill and returned to her castle. The grandeur of the entire castle once again took Clark by surprise, and he hadn't expected his sister to have so many secret bases. Their family probably thought she was just a bookworm. If they knew about her many identities, they might be shocked. "Clark, give me the chip." Arabella planned to take it in and examine it. "Sure." Clark handed over the chip, then joined her in her private base with a laptop, ready to crack the clues Carol had left behind. Their underlings were stunned, not knowing what the boss and Clark were busy with, from day till night, still busy after half a day without any plans to open the door. 2 underlings waited outside the door, left waiting, right waiting, eventually pushing each other. "The boss didn't eat lunch, and now it's evening. You go tell her to eat something and continue later." "I wouldn't dare. You're a veteran. Even if you interrupt the boss, she won't blame you." "Who says so? You're a newbie, and you won't be faulted for your ignorance. It's best if you go." "No, no, no. Even if I had 100 guts, I wouldn't dare." 2 underlings were passing the buck to each other outside the door when suddenly, the door swung open. Startled by the icy aura of the girl standing in front of them, the pair quickly declared in unison, "Boss, dinner's ready." Arabella glanced at the darkening sky and couldn't help but ask, "Any news from Mafia C?" News? What news?" The 2 underlings were stumped. What news could there possibly be from Mafia C? Wait, was there supposed to be any news? Arabella was somewhat puzzled. By all means, Romeo should have reached the triangular zone by now and would have contacted her immediately. Why hadn't he arrived yet? Should she call and check? What if he was just held up by work, and she would be interrupting him? With these thoughts in mind, Arabella dismissed the idea, "We'll eat later." She closed the door once again. The 2 underlings exchanged glances. Why was the boss increasingly interested in the affairs of Mafia C? Ever since the alliance was formed, anyone who disrespected Mafia C was crushed under the boss's orders. "Clark, how is it going?" After entering the study, Arabella turned her gaze to Clark, who was busy checking the templates. She had just decrypted the chip hidden in the pendant that Carol had given to Mr. Earwood. There were 10 templates in total, each filled with different combinations of letters. Clark had matched the odd code inscribed on the heart-shaped pendant that Carol had given to Mrs. Earwood with the templates, and the result was 21.1 degrees north latitude, 99.2 degrees east longitude, and one word dangerous. "Where's this?" Clark was somewhat surprised, and he hadn't expected to get such a location. Was Carol trying to tell him that this place was dangerous? This place is in the triangular zone, but no one operates there. It could be said to be a very remote place. Could Carol have left something there? I have to go. Clark stood up, ready to leave. You're injured like this, better not. I'll go instead, Arabella offered. She glanced at the silver key in her hand. This was found by Mrs. Earwood in the scarf that Carol had gifted her. Could it be a key to something? She would bring it along just in case. No. Clark refused. Your underlings said it too. There are several forces looking for you lately. It's safer for you to stay here. He couldn't let his sister take the risk. I'll be quick. There won't be any trouble. Arabella didn't give him a chance to refuse. Let's eat first. I'm hungry. Only then did Clark realize that they hadn't eaten for half a day while investigating the clues Carol had left behind. She must be starving. Thinking this, he felt guilty again. All right, let's get some grub. Clark descended the staircase with her, but before they could even reach the dining table, the sound of an airplane landing outside the mansion echoed through the air. One of her associates sprinted in. His face was as pale as a ghost. Boss, the head of Mafia C is here. It looks like he's landing on our airstrip. Should we stop him? Even though their two gangs had already formed an alliance, the mansion was still their boss's personal territory. To brazenly land his plane on her airstrip without so much as a heads-up. Wasn't that a tad overbearing? Let him land. Arabella's eyes softened a fraction. Send someone to greet him. Ha! The associate thought he had misheard her, but under the weight of her gaze, he quickly complied. Oh, how the mighty have fallen! The Arabella of old feared nothing and nobody, not even the god. Why was she being so courteous to Mafia C now? Sure, Mafia C had a formidable reputation, but there was no need to kowtow to them so. The associate was a tad confused. It seemed as though Arabella had gone soft, but he dared not voice his thoughts. Instead, he just led the welcome party. Clark noticed that though Arabella had originally planned to eat, upon hearing of Romeo's arrival, she turned on her heel and headed towards the airstrip, not bothering to hide her anticipation. Love really does conquer all. Clark could only follow his sister's lead and join her in welcoming his future brother-in-law. Once the plane had landed and the doors opened, a tall, austere man appeared before them. His icy gaze and regal demeanor made him seem like a mountain, so imposing that those below him dared not breathe too loudly. His right-hand man, Carl, trailed behind him. Carl thought, "Boss, you're the one who wanted to see Miss Bella. Why did you have to drag me along? I want to go home, and I want a vacation." Arabella's men were rightfully wary of this new visitor. After all, he'd led Mafia C in many groundbreaking operations back in the triangular zone. As the man descended the stairs, they nervously greeted him. Mr. Macmillan. This was Mr. Macmillan's first visit to their mansion, and his assertive entry left them unsure of his intentions. Where's your boss? Carl asked, worried that Miss Bella was off investigating something on her own again. Our boss. The associate began but then spotted Arabella approaching. She had a cool, aloof air about her, and the wind whipping through her hair gave her a certain feminine charm. Romeo's gaze softened when he saw her, and he walked over to wrap her in his arms. They hadn't seen each other in days, and Romeo's hug was noticeably tighter. The 7 or 8 associates were flabbergasted, their eyes nearly popping out of their skulls. What was going on? The head of Mafia C was making a move on their boss, right in front of them. More importantly, why wasn't Arabella kicking him where it hurt? Instead, she wrapped her arms around his waist, looking up at him with bright eyes. Weren't you supposed to arrive at noon? The associates' jaws dropped. Was their boss in a relationship? And her boyfriend was the boss of Mafia C? That's downright bone-chilling. If word got out, it would cause quite a stir. Sorry, I was held up with something. Romeo gently stroked the girl's soft hair. Have you been eating properly lately? Yes. Just as she answered, a rumble came from her stomach. Arabella was speechless. Lying. Romeo chuckled indulgently, his eyes full of happiness and satisfaction. Waiting for me? Carl couldn't help but chime in. The boss was about to leave after finishing up in Dawnstar, but hearing that a local fairy tale-themed amusement park was struggling financially, he decided to buy and gift it to you. The amusement park was a dreamy place, with a large venue and beautiful decorations. However, due to the high entry fee, it didn't attract many customers and eventually struggled to stay open. The minions around them were taken aback. A whole amusement park as a present? Not just some jewelry or clothes. The boss of Mafia C was quite a big spender when it came to romance, wasn't he? Have you thought of a name for the new park yet? You can name it when you're ready. Romeo's fingers gently traced the girl's soft, delicate cheek. Her beautiful face, every inch of her skin, was etched into his memory. Arabella, with her bright, clear eyes, nodded, sure. Let's grab something to eat first. Romeo supported her waist and noticed Clark beside them. How's your injury, Clark? He'd heard from his men in Florida that Clark was injured while helping two old folks. It's nothing, just a scratch. Clark walked alongside them. I heard from Bella that you've been secretly looking into Carol's whereabouts for me and found that she was in the triangular zone a month ago. Without this crucial information from Romeo, he would never have found the triangular zone. At first, he was a bit hostile towards his brother-in-law because it took him much effort to reconnect with his sister, and he didn't want her to be taken away by someone else so soon. He was also worried that Romeo was just fooling around, not genuinely in love with his sister. But after a few interactions, he saw that in Romeo's eyes, there was only her. He was cold and ruthless in front of others, but in front of his sister, he was as obedient as a puppy. But I couldn't find any more useful clues for you. Romeo's men had only managed to find out this much. It's already very helpful. Clark patted him on the shoulder in return, trying to comfort him. Even though we don't know where Carol is hiding, the triangular zone isn't big. As long as we keep looking, we're bound to find her one day. I feel guilty for dragging you two into this. You're wrong to think that way. Your problems are our problems. Besides, we're familiar with this place. It's safer for you here than anywhere else. After Romeo finished, Arabella added, if you were to go to the triangular zone alone, that would be truly dangerous. It was a confirmed case of a lamb walking into a lion's den. The triangular zone was filled with gangs. An outsider would quickly attract attention and likely be bullied. But with the backing of Mafia C and Mafia Flame, things would be different. Boss, should we bring up the other gift from Miss Bella? Carl suddenly suggested. Arabella and Clark were both surprised. Another gift? Romeo looked at the girl, his tone full of indulgence. The guys from Hell Base were looking for you, weren't they? I heard from my men that they've had quite a few run-ins with Mafia Flame. Recently, they even came knocking, asking you to come to their turf within 3 days. With such a provocation, Arabella didn't bat an eye, but Romeo couldn't stand it. Arabella lifted her gaze and asked, so, you've nabbed their guys? The plan is to string their boss up outside the Mafia Flame joint for 3 days and nights. A lesson to the rest, Romeo replied. Arabella thought, wouldn't that be a bit too ostentatious? Inviting trouble. At this point, none of them are a match for either of our gangs. Romeo didn't consider the other small gangs and factions at all, especially in the triangular zone. He could do anything without worrying about them. Just strip them and send them back, Arabella suggested. She wanted to find Carol next and didn't want any further complications. Carl was a bit surprised. Was that all? Wasn't that letting them off easy? If it hadn't been for his reckless orders, so many people wouldn't have been doggedly pursuing Miss Bella in the past. All right, as you wish, Romeo said, his eyes twinkling with gentle affection. It was her call on how to handle it since the person was already sent over. I'll have them put him in a coffin and carried over, Arabella instructed her subordinates. Her henchmen didn't know what to say. They felt that their boss was just as cunning as the head of Mafia C. They were like peas in a pod. They wondered how the base would react when they saw their boss being sent back in such a manner. Would they feel humiliated? After entering the castle, Arabella had someone set a place for Romeo at the table. The subordinates inside were also stunned. They had never expected the head of Group S to show up here, let alone share a meal with their boss. In the unseen corners, What kind of history did their boss and the head of Group S have to be so friendly all of a sudden? Why did they seem like a family? The atmosphere was oddly harmonious. And Clark, acting like a gracious host, said, "Romeo, have more. You and Bella have been working too hard those days." Everyone looked at each other as if asking, what's happening? Were they seeing things, or were their boss and the head of group really dating with the family's approval? The two seemed inseparable, like a couple. If this news were true, it would rock the entire triangular zone. As Arabella was eating, she brought up recent events one by one to share with Romeo. The subordinates were stunned again. They never thought their usually quiet boss could say so much in one go. Romeo listened with a smile, his gaze on her both indulgent and gentle. When she talked about the dangers she'd faced, he gently cleaned some ketchup from the corner of her mouth. "Next time something like this happens, you have to take me with you." Even though he knew she was capable, he couldn't help worrying. She had managed to dodge a bullet this time, but what about next time? Or the time after that? Even a 1 in a 1 in a million chance. He couldn't bear it. Arabella then shared the secrets she had cracked. Clark, at her side, suddenly felt like a third wheel. When he had been with Carol, he never felt their relationship was particularly sweet. But now, tasting the sweetness of their interaction, he felt like it was overkill. After a while, Arabella's phone vibrated. She checked it and saw that it was a call from Taylor. "Bella, have you two managed to escape the danger? Did Clark seek medical attention? Is his injury serious? Is he all right?" She had been worried sick, and as she hadn't received a call from the siblings confirming their safety, she decided to call them herself. "Clark is fine. None of his injuries are critical. As for the package Carol sent you guys, we've managed to decode a part of it. We should be able to locate her soon." Upon hearing this, Taylor was relieved. Good, as long as you guys are safe, that's all that matters." She didn't want to be a bother, so after a few words of concern, she quickly ended the call. After dinner, Romeo wanted to take Arabella to Group S. She knew he wanted everyone to be aware of her identity. Just then, one of his men came to report, "Boss, Dennis has arrived." Hearing a man's name, Romeo's eyes darkened slightly. Who was Dennis? He seemed to be someone of great importance. Where was he? Arabella seemed to take a keen interest in that man. "He's outside the castle, at the northwest gate. He seemed to be trying to avoid being seen." "Invite him to the drawing room." Arabella let go of Romeo's hand and gently said, "I need to take care of some business first. You and Clark stay put and wait for me to join you." "All right, be careful." Romeo just patted her head, his eyes full of indulgence and tenderness, not giving any thought to anything else. The girl was just going to handle some business. The castle had a secluded drawing room on the first floor. As soon as Arabella appeared, she saw a tall figure standing with his back to the window. "You're here." Arabella closed the door. Dennis turned around, a black mask covering his face, revealing only a pair of clear eyes. Just by looking at his eyes, one could tell he was in his early 20s, about the same age as Arabella. "I heard you've returned to Mafia Flame. I came as soon as I could, hoping you could do me a favor." Dennis paused before making his request. "I need something." Arabella smirked. "What was that?" "A starflower from the medicinal mountain, just one would do." It was said that the most valuable plant in the entire medicinal mountain was the starflower. There were only 2 left, and they could cure all kinds of diseases. Even the healthy would benefit from consuming it. It's extremely valuable. Many people had tried to get their hands on this precious plant before. Arabella gave a faint smile. "Do you know? Granny Grace has passed away." Upon hearing the news, Dennis' eyes widened in disbelief, evidently shocked. While shocked, his eyes also turned dull. "I'm sorry to have reminded you of such painful memories. It seems the starflower really is just a rumor." He knew how much Arabella cared for Granny Grace. If Arabella had the starflower, there was no way she couldn't save Granny Grace. There was only one possibility, that is, there was no such thing as starflower in the medicinal mountain. It was just a rumor spread by other gangs, hoping to find an excuse to trouble Mafia Flame. Dennis' gaze was as dark as a stormy sky, In that case, I'm sorry for the disturbance. Just as he was about to leave, Arabella called out to him, "What kind of illness is it? Maybe I can help." Hearing her say that, Dennis stopped, giving a bitter smile. "It's complicated. No one in this world can cure it." "Are you sure?" Arabella raised her eyes, intrigued by this supposedly incurable disease. "It's extremely complicated, and we're running out of time." Dennis' eyes, like a pending rainstorm, were filled with pain. He added, "Perhaps this is just the will of destiny." The sight of Dennis' crestfallen face stirred something within Arabella. "Seems like that person means a lot to you." "More than my own life," Dennis replied, lifting his gaze to meet Arabella's. He smiled, "I'm glad I met you in this life. Hopefully, in the next one, we can meet under different circumstances." "Dennis, don't do anything foolish," Arabella implored, sensing his despair. "You once told me that we should never give up as long as there's a glimmer of hope." "But there's no hope left." Dennis' voice was steeped in desolation. His eyes mirrored his words. "Arabella, there's no hope left. We have less than 24 hours. I thought the starflower could save her." He had hoped against hope that the rumored miraculous herb was real and had even swallowed his pride to seek Arabella's help. But when she confirmed there was no such plant on the herb mountain, his last shred of hope was obliterated. He felt like he had plunged into an abyss. Despite everything he had done, he couldn't save her. His shoulders trembled ever so slightly, a clear indication that he was crying. His sorrow was palpable, ensnaring the two individuals in the room. "Let me see her," Arabella proposed, hoping to offer some assistance. She wanted to leave this world in peace. Dennis choked out. Gratitude was evident in his voice. "Thank you for your kindness. I'll thank you on her behalf. It was worth meeting you in this lifetime." Given the victim's identity, it wasn't appropriate to make a big deal out of this. It was best to let her leave quietly. And he would accompany her to another world, ensuring she wouldn't be alone. As she watched him walk away, Arabella softly said, "If you need any help, don't hesitate to reach out to me." Dennis paused but didn't turn around. It took him a moment before he could utter a simple acknowledgement. He then quickly exited the room, the tear at the corner of his eye unnoticed by Arabella. Leaving the reception room, Arabella felt a bit down. Romeo, who had just seen Dennis leave with reddened eyes, now noticed Arabella's low spirits. He couldn't help but ask, "What happened?" "I might not have a chance to repay my debt in this life." Arabella paused before looking up at Romeo. "Let's go. I need you to accompany me somewhere." Carol had left geographical coordinates. If she went there alone, someone would likely report back to Romeo. So, it was better to invite him along. "What about Clark?" Romeo asked, seeing through her intentions. "You want us to team up?" Arabella nodded, appreciating his understanding. Clark was sitting on the living room couch, his fingers tapping away at the laptop keyboard. Despite comparing the strange symbol Carol had left him with a global image database, he couldn't find anything useful. What on earth did Carol's mysterious symbol mean? "Clark, we should check out the location Carol left us tomorrow. It's too late now, and we can't arrange for backup. You're injured, so you should rest up tonight." "I'm heading to bed too," Arabella suggested, making sure to add, "We all should get some rest." Clark paused his work, replying gently, "Okay." Turning to Romeo, he asked, "What about you?" "I'm heading back to my place. I'll come over in the morning." "All right." Clark closed his laptop and slowly got up, wincing in pain. "We agreed to act together tomorrow. No one gets left behind." "Agreed," Arabella responded readily. Half an hour later, Clark couldn't find any leads on the strange symbol in his room. Standing by the window, he noticed that the light in his sister's room next door had dimmed. Could she be up to something without telling him? As he pondered over this, he walked next door and knocked on the door. Arabella, in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes, showed signs of slight fatigue. "Clark? What's up? Did you go to bed?" Clark was surprised. "I'm sorry, I saw your light dimmed and thought you." "Thought what?" Arabella yawned lazily, seemingly not understanding Clark's implication. Clark felt sorry for his suspicion and was also charmed by his sister's adorable appearance. She had dealt with so many people today and accomplished so much, and she must be worn out. And he, as her brother, had suspected that she would act alone without telling him. He was too suspicious, too distrustful of his adorable sister. He could suspect anyone, but how could he suspect his own sister? Especially such a good, such a cute sister. Clark, whatever it is, just tell me. Arabella's eyes still showed sleepiness, with a hint of redness at the corners, indicating that she was trying hard to stay awake to talk to him. No worries, I just wanted to see if you were asleep. If not, I was going to tell you to get some rest. Clark extended his uninjured right hand, gently stroking her head. Go to bed, good night. Have a sweet dream. Arabella, still a bit drowsy, said, You should go to bed early too, Clark. We'll act together tomorrow. You need a good rest tonight. Okay, I promise, I'll go to bed right now. Clark stroked her head again, and after she went into her room, he returned to his own. To avoid slowing his sister down, he quickly turned off the light and went to bed, ready to recharge his energy and check the location where Carol had left clues tomorrow. On the other hand, Arabella had changed out of her pajamas and put on casual clothes. Seeing that Clark's light had dimmed, she directly came out of the castle through the secret passage in her room. Romeo was already waiting for her in his car. Did Clark go to bed? Romeo opened the car door for her, smilingly asked. Yeah. Arabella had guessed that Clark would definitely come to her, so she set him aside. Clark was seriously injured today. It's better for him to take a good rest. We'll park the car a bit further and walk over later. Okay. 20 minutes later, they arrived in a jungle. Passing through here, they would reach the location left by Carol. The jungle was pitch black without any light, only the sound of insects and birds exuding a chilling gloom. If an ordinary person saw this scene, they would probably be scared away. But Arabella took out night vision goggles from her bag and handed one to Romeo. Unexpectedly, the next second, Romeo circled her waist, bowed his head, and kissed her lips. Because of Clark's presence today, he hadn't overstepped any boundaries. Finally, all the longing of these days was released at this moment, as Romeo tasted the sweetness from the girl, deepening the kiss further. The gentle moonlight shone on them, making this moment as beautiful as a dream in a fairy tale. After who knows how long, Romeo let go of her, his eyes full of deep affection and satisfaction. Arabella put the night vision goggles on him, making him look even more handsome. Their fingers intertwined, and they walked shoulder to shoulder into the depths of the jungle. Even with night vision goggles that allowed her to penetrate the darkness and see every detail in the dense forest, Arabella still managed to stumble over a rock at her feet. Careful, Romeo said in a timely manner, pulling her into his arms. Did you hurt your foot? Before Arabella could reply, Romeo had already knelt down, letting her sit on his lap as he unlaced her boots to inspect the damage. Her foot was fine, but a few scratches on her ankle, likely from a branch, looked raw and red. Seeing the tender and now injured skin of the young woman made Romeo's heart ache. Does it hurt? Asked Romeo, his eyes full of concern. Arabella shook her head. If she hadn't seen the scratches herself, she wouldn't have even known she had been cut by a branch. She was never one to fuss over petty injuries like this. In her eyes, it wasn't even a wound. At most, it was as if the branch had simply tickled her. And your foot? Does it hurt from the stumble? Can you walk? I can, I'm fine. Arabella thought he was making a fuss over nothing. I'm not that delicate. After helping her put her boots back on, Romeo promptly lifted her into his arms. I'm wonderful, she protested. I just wanted to carry you, Romeo replied, his steps steady as he moved forward with her in his arms. You're so light. Haven't been eating properly these days, have you? I was heavy before. You were always light, but you're even lighter now. Romeo's steps slowed down due to the added weight. You need to eat more. I've learned to cook all your favorite dishes. I can make them for you when we get back. You've been secretly practicing all this while? Not secretly. Openly. He replied, the corners of his mouth curling into a gentle, doting smile. Was there anything else you'd like me to learn? In other words, where can I improve further? Your advice is always valuable. Romeo's smile grew even warmer. Laughing, Arabella wrapped her arms around his neck, ready to respond. But before she could, she quickly covered his mouth, whispering in his ear, "Someone's coming." Romeo heard it too. He set her down, and they quickly hid, with Romeo pulling her close to him, as if afraid she'd be exposed to the slightest danger. Two men were wandering around in the forest with flashlights, grumbling as they did. "So cold out here, and we still have to patrol. The elders are being paranoid. That traitor wouldn't dare to come back. If she ever did come back, the two of us wouldn't stand a chance against her. We are just going through the motions here. I think the traitor's probably long dead. The elders are just worried about that thing she took." "No, you're seeing it too superficially. She was once highly regarded by the elders, and then she stabbed them in the back. The elders' hearts turned cold, and that's why they issued a kill order against her. Women, in the end, always get lost in love. She had such a bright future, and yet she chose love over power. If it were me, I'd choose power any day. Love's just a pointless notion. Here we are, stuck patrolling in the middle of the night because of her. Let's just quit this and go have a drink to warm ourselves up. It's freezing out here. If the elders find out we're slacking off, you know better than me how ugly our deaths would be." All right. Let's finish patrolling here first, then we'll go have a drink. Life's tough." Romeo and Arabella listened as their voices grew fainter until they were finally gone. Only then did they rise, locking eyes in mutual understanding.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.